Welcome to the Built to Win podcast, a show about entrepreneurs, their journeys, their processes, and how they built their dreams into reality. Today, we have the CEO of Playmaker Life and HBCU finance and media, soon to be head of everything. My guy, Jason Malone.
What's up, man? Appreciate you. How you doing today?
Doing well, man. Doing well. So I appreciate you coming on, first off. But second, I really want to start where we usually do with everyone else. I know where you are right now in terms of where your media journey is and media conglomerate is on its way. Where did it all start?
It all started, so I'm originally from LA.
Oh, okay.
And
all right.
born and raised specifically in Carson, if you know where that is for your viewers.
Soccer. There's soccer players there.
The soccer stadium. So grew up in Carson, born and raised, had a good time from I guess I would call it a middle class family. My father was a cop. My mother didn't work, but she worked at home. She did a fantastic job of raising me and my brother and my sister. And so had a fairly solid middle class upbringing growing up, right? Learned how to work hard from my father, blue collar worker. Just kind of really taught me the importance of family and faith and how that can parlay into your ultimate success in life. So I grew up with a pretty decent and solid foundation, which I love and appreciate my parents for. But I was an athlete as well. So I played college football out of high school. I first started my journey at the University of New Mexico on a football scholarship.
Okay.
So moved to New Mexico, had a good time there, and it was in that period where I really started to kind of unpack like what my goals were, like who I wanted to be, kind of like how was I going to set I guess you would say like intention for my life and what my purpose was. And it just so happened that my coach at the time that recruited me to be there, Bronco Mendenhall, he left to take the head coaching job at BYU. So now all of a sudden I'm in a position where the coach that brought me there is no longer there. My champion, my support system essentially had left. Mm-hmm. So I was in this new space of trying to figure out what was next for me. And, it's interesting whenever you're in that position as a 17-year-old kid. I know you played college football as well. And so
I played at playing, but yeah.
So, it's very political, right? Mm-hmm. And, the coach that took over the position, for whatever reason, he just didn't like my style of play. He didn't like me. So I went from being a player on the travel team to all of a sudden I'm taken off the travel squad. Now I'm on the practice squad.
Oh, wow.
So
that's a big drop.
Yeah. And it that stemmed from them changing my position, right? So I went from playing defensive back to linebacker. And now I'm on the practice squad. And so that forced me to like really start to think about like, what am I here for? What am I trying to do? And that ultimately led to me deciding to transfer schools. So I transferred from New Mexico to Georgetown, which is where I ultimately graduated. Played football there as well. Had a phenomenal experience going from Albuquerque to now Chocolate City.
Yes, yes.
Great transition. Loved my time there. But it was while I was at Georgetown that I fell in love with the stock market, I would say.
Yeah, okay.
Which led to my pursuit to trying to get a job on Wall Street. Long story short, I ended up getting an opportunity to work at Merrill Lynch, initially starting off on the sales and trading desk, where basically I'm on the phone with large institutions doing block trades of stocks and both equity derivatives day to day. So as soon as the market opens, I'm pounding the phones day in, day out. And I did that for a couple years before transitioning into more traditional investment banking, which is where I was focused on fundraising for institutions as well as mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
Did that for about 2 to 3 years and ultimately transitioned onto the asset management side, where I was focused on helping advise private equity funds and hedge funds on their asset allocations and how they were raising capital and how they were going to market with their different investment strategies. Great seat to sit in, because I ended up meeting, which was interesting, some of the richest people in the world. These asset managers having billions, some of them trillions of dollars in assets under management. And what I realized while sitting in that seat was most of the asset allocators were not, as I would say, service providers. They were business owners and entrepreneurs, which piqued my interest to say, well, how do I get onto the other side of the table? So that led me to decide, it's like, well, I don't exactly know what industry or what field I will go into. So I decided to go back to business school. So moved to Chicago, went to business school at the University of Chicago, and it was while I was at Chicago that my entrepreneurship journey started. While I was there, I started what is called a search fund, and basically what a search fund is you go out and raise capital from a group of investors with the idea that you will use that capital to identify an investment opportunity to acquire and then install yourself as the CEO and operator of that business. Your investors then they transition from becoming investors into the fund to investors in that underlying company. So I started that business with a classmate of mine and ended up acquiring a portfolio of franchise restaurants in the Chicago market. And that was a phenomenal experience. I would call it my second business school experience, where I took all the lickings that can come with running and owning a business, from understanding raising capital, managing working capital, hiring staff, managing inventory, managing the actual physical facility itself, the real estate, right? There's all these components that go into running and operating a business that you don't learn where you're sitting in a classroom, right?
So what you're saying then is that the book knowledge that you receive isn't always practical?
Not at all. Not at all, man. And it's weird to say, but sometimes it's just flat out wrong, right? Because the theoretical approach just doesn't work in real life sometimes, right? Phenomenal just experience I had overall, but what I also learned about myself was you have to be a special operator to manage and run a restaurant, and that just wasn't me, right? Ultimately decided to sell that business. My partner and I, we liquidated that business and we returned capital to investors, and that led me to figuring out what my next phase of entrepreneurship was going to look like. And ultimately that landed in media and tech. Ended up moving back to California and started the company that I'm currently running, which is Playmaker Life, and also HBCU Life TV, which are essentially networks that aggregate micro communities and use the power of social media and other media outlets to essentially feed those micro communities content that they care about. And we're able to monetize these networks through brand partnerships, merchandising, and so forth. So it's interesting because, what I'm doing now has been impacted by what happened in the past, right? The sports element that, my sports background led to me starting this platform that has a lot of tie-ins to sports with youth and high school sports. The fact that while I was in college, I pledged a fraternity, which led me to having a really cool experience around just the whole, I would say, Black culture in college and getting exposure to HBCUs in that regard. And
so you pledge Alpha Phi Alpha, right?
Oh, see, you're a funny man. I'm a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi, but tons of brothers on the A Phi A side, so it's all love there. But nonetheless, that experience, as I'm sure you know and appreciate, just really sort of opens your eyes to just I would say Black culture in college in general. And my affinity towards that is why I decided to start the HBCU Life TV platform, which, the idea behind that is to sort of capsule that culture, capsule that energy in a way that we can appreciate.
Yes.
So it has been a journey to get here, and I'm still learning, because as you know, entrepreneurship, the success journey, the success is you owning the journey, right?
Oh man.
And so I'm still on that journey, and it's exciting, but I've met a lot of really cool people along the way, and I'm thankful and I'm grateful that I've been able to experience what I've experienced.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to start off with that bar that you had. Success is owning your journey. And that means so much in the grand scheme of the entrepreneurial journey. So I'm gonna zoom back to Chicago, because when we talk about managing people and managing processes, managing property, those are things that a lot of people, they just don't get. So owning that, what are some of the things that you feel like, man, that was a good one that we learned? What are some of those lessons?
There's a lot of like technical things that I can sort of speak to, and managerial things that I could speak to, but I would say the biggest for me was the people skills that I learned, right? That was the first time that I was, I don't know if there's a proper way to say it, but I was forced to work with all different caliber levels, and from the standpoint of like skill sets, right? From dealing with, stakeholders in the city and different political constituents, on down to our hourly workers, right? There's naturally a spectrum as it relates to like skill set, intellectual ability, just overall know-how and resources, right? Yes. And so that was the first time where professionally I was sitting in the seat where I had to like swim up and downstream, I guess is what I'll say, which is funny because like my first job, I was working at a grocery store, working at McDonald's. So I had that experience. I know how to roll up my sleeves and get it out the mud. But then contrasting that with the experience that I had on Wall Street and of course business school, and then now I'm in a seat where I have to like merge those two experiences. Yes. So my learnings in people skills, which I would say that's probably has benefited me the most in terms of just understanding how the honing of people skills is probably the number one component that I would say impacts your overall success, like how you move and how you manage with people. And I had some pretty like, I would say just gnarly experiences dealing with people, man. From folks getting stabbed in front of the restaurant, to people not coming into work because of domestic violence issues, on down to like literally being shaken down by some of the political constituents to make sure that I was going to get my like health license, right? I'm dealing with the whole gamut of dealing with people, right? So I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about just the United States of America and how we move and how we do business in this country. And I would say like those learnings have probably benefited me the most, beyond just the managerial stuff, beyond the technical stuff, which also had its value, but definitely just learning how to move with different types of people.
Yeah, that's great, man. Like obviously we've had these conversations over the months and time that we've known each other. Is I've gone through some of those hurdles. What I say and I believe is we as entrepreneurs, as successful entrepreneurs, to be that is you have to take action, and you have to be naively optimistic about your outcome. That's the only way that it's going to happen. And the only way that it stops happening is that you quit, because as one of my guys, Thomas Vu, said, the peaks and valleys, they're coming.
Oh, yeah.
Peaks and valleys are definitely coming. So I know one of the things that I had to own is not having a baked out plan. And when I say baked out plan, I had no plan when I started. I just knew that I could solve problems, and I thought that was it. Solve problems / sell products, and bring people on,
Yeah.
and they will be all about that journey. And so a lot of the things that I've had happen, I have friends that dealing with all of the things from lawsuits to all of the ups and downs and negative of employees. But what I have personally distilled it in is the fact that if we stop and slow down, really not even slow, like slow down, but stop and put together a cohesive plan, knowing that that plan is probably not going to work all the way, but having a plan written down, understanding what people's roles and responsibilities are before you hire them,
Right.
having a framework of how you hire, and then going out and getting those people, putting them in a place where you feel that they can best succeed for themselves and for your business. So I think when you and I talked about the restaurants, I was like, yeah, like it's exactly what I dealt with, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great, man. So after you done the restaurant thing, you've done B school, you said, okay, this is not going to work for me. How do you decide that, you know what, I'm going to create a media empire? What was the mind? Because those are very, very different things.
Yeah, good question. In between me moving from Chicago back to California, I took a stint at a company called TrueCar, where I was basically doing their media and marketing buying for some of their marketing and I'll say business development partnerships that they had. And so within that, I was responsible for facilitating the relationship between TrueCar, which was a car buying platform, and creating white label car buying platforms for your Allstates, your AARPs, your USAAs. So in us creating these white label car buying platforms for these large platforms, we of course had to market them.
Yeah.
So within that, that constituted me buying radio ads, buying television ads, doing huge social media buys. I had the opportunity to work on buying a Super Bowl ad, right?
Oh, nice.
So it's in that media buying aspect that I became privy to just how powerful the media industry is from the standpoint of influence, but also from the standpoint of scale, right? And that was probably the biggest thing that industry had that I saw difficult with the restaurant business that I was in. In order to scale in that type of hard asset business, it's very extremely capital intensive.
Yeah.
And so is media, but because of the prevalence of social media, it's a way to crack in the door without having, the capital that NBC or Fox would have, right? So, nowadays when you're watching, television shows, you might have 1 million, 2 million, maybe 3 million people watching your average TV show. We're getting 1 million, 2 million views on a social post. It's a lot cheaper to do that than it is to do that for television. Okay. So once I started to understand that dynamic, that relationship, I was like, well, this is a way for me to shoe into the industry, get a level of scale, build a media enterprise on top of these platforms that exist, and eventually parlay that into a more traditional media business. So that was the transition.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. So build up the social and everything else, and then get to a critical mass where you transition those viewers or those clients to a different platform.
And that's essentially the stage that I'm at right now, right? So we first started with social media. The first page that I ever started, which is kind of weird to say now because we take it for granted, but when I started Instagram and Facebook marketing, video was not a thing yet, right? Wow. So I think the only platform that was doing video was Vine, which has since been it's gone, right? So when I first started doing video, and I mentioned I was doing youth and high school sports, so I'm posting highlight clips, touchdowns, slam dunks, things like that. It was new. And because it was new and I was one of the few outlets that was doing it,
Yeah.
my channels blew up. So within 6 months, we were like we had basically 1 million followers. And so that scale at that time allowed for me to establish myself as like a social media agency and to start to get brand opportunities that we were using to basically they were advertising on top of our platform for the views. So that's how we started. But the idea was to leverage that business model to eventually scale into more traditional media, which is where we're at now. So currently we're in a space where we're looking to acquire broadcast television stations so that we can further our reach, further our footprint.
Okay.
On a weekly basis, we're doing anywhere between 5 to 8 million views on our social posts. Now we're going to start to use that audience to drive traffic basically upstream to let them know, hey, you can tune into your local listings, you can find us, you can watch us here.
Okay. That's great. So because I'm not in that space, the questions that I really have are as you transition and you have wherever this media is taken in, consumed. I think that's the proper phrase. Wherever it's consumed, do you have like your traditional? I think about when I was a kid, channel 16, 22, 28, 34, and 46. So those were our local channels. So now is Playmaker Life one of those channels?
Yeah, that's the idea, right? In the traditional setting, or in the setting that you're speaking of, because that's also in the world that I grew up in, you would tune into a dial on your television set to pick up that channel. It actually still exists. You know, we take it for granted because we live in these coastal cities, but in a lot of places in the U.S. that still exists, right? Where the cable signal isn't as reliable or the internet signal isn't as reliable, right? So the broadcast element still has a lot of value in our country, especially in the rural areas. But in addition to that, because there was they call it the cram down. It happened in 2009 to 2010, where a lot of these broadcast stations were basically forced to upgrade their capabilities for broadband usage. So with that, a lot of these broadcast channels are now, you can basically distribute them over internet protocol, which, layman's language means that I can send a feed over the internet, which means that now I can digitize a broadcast channel, which broadens the potential reach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome, man. So as you're part of Slick Studios and the Slick ecosystem, that's being put together with the MTU and everything else. Where does Playmaker Life and HBCU Life, where does that live and how does that integrate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the coolest things about Slick and shout out to Baron Davis is that it is a platform that allows for entrepreneurs and creators like myself to plug into and to scale our brands, scale our platforms. Slick is the infrastructure, Slick is the technology, and Slick is also the brand. And because of just the resources that the platform has, it allows for a brand like myself to get access to certain production capabilities that I would have probably had a significantly higher cost if I were to go at it out on my own, right? So it's leveraging the resources like that. It's also with Slick being an aggregation of community, I'm also able to add value as a community member, right? So I have information, I have resources, I have access to things that other people in the community can also benefit from, and vice versa, right?
Yes.
So that to me has been like probably one of the coolest things about just plugging in here at Slick Studios is that you have this collective of entrepreneurs, people are sharing resources, folks are about the collective win, and Barron's just done a really good job of building a team of, high performing people that I think are moving the needle in the realm of media.
All right, I love it. Good stuff. So from that space where we are right now, what's next for you, for Playmaker Life, for HBCU? Are you set to take over Byron Allen sometime?
Shout out to Byron Allen. I think instead of like taking over, is more so just being another player in the game, right? I think the media space is it's one of the industries that's just expansive, right? So I don't think everything that we do is taking food off the plate from someone else. There's so many lanes within media that are additive. It's just a matter of like creating a new lane for yourself. And I hope that's what I'm doing is creating a new lane. Hopefully I have the level of influence that a Byron Allen has one day. But the goal for us is to continue to scale our footprint, to leverage the technology of today and build our network on top of it. Leverage the technology of the future and doing the same thing. And then I have, as I shared, I have an investment bone inside of me. I've been doing a lot of investing on the side. I would like to sort of eventually formalize that in an institutional way, right? So the notion of investment fund, those are things that I think about a lot in terms of like the next phase, because as an entrepreneur, you're making investment decisions daily, investing in your team, investing in this resource, investing in this tool, this tech, right? So the mindset of investing is always there. It's just that in my mind, I can't get away from how I was formerly trained. Like I'm always, balance sheets, income statements. Those are things that I think about constantly, and I still have a passion for it.
Yeah.
So doing it in a formal, institutional way is definitely something I see in my future.
I love it. So where can the viewers find you?
No, I laugh because I try to keep it super low key. But you can definitely find me on my Instagram. My public Instagram is J Malone Said. That's SAID. J Malone Said is the Instagram.
So you're saying you have a ghost profile as well?
Well, as part of my social enterprise, I'm managing like well over 50 channels.
Oh, wow.
So I be on these internets. but my personal profile, J Malone Said on Instagram. You can get me there, shoot me a DM, and yeah, man, I'd be happy to connect. You could also look me up on LinkedIn. I'm decently active on LinkedIn, just promoting the business. So that's another channel that you could get at me.
All right, perfect. And there it is. There's J Malone Said. Well, Jason, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on, man. Keep doing what you're doing and keep putting us on.
I appreciate you for having me, bro.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for tuning in to the Built to Win podcast. We'll see you guys next week.